There we are. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thanks to the students who are joining us today. And I know that there are going to be a number of eager students watching this recording after we conclude. But a huge thank you to our guests, Dr. Nathan Gonzalez and Eric Milenkiewicz. I'm really very, very grateful to you both for joining us today. I'll share links to our guests' pages. Nathan is archivist and in charge of special collections at the A.K. Smiley Public Library in Redlands. And Eric is archivist and head of special collections and university archives right here at Cal State San Bernardino. It's my great pleasure to welcome them back. They've joined us for similar sessions like this in the past, and I'm excited to hear what they've been up to and to share a little bit about getting into the field of archives and the kind of work that they've been doing. So I'll toss it first to Nathan and then to Eric, please.
Hi, well, good afternoon, and I'm excited to share a little bit of our story with you guys. One of the reasons why it's really important for me to participate in things like this, because when I was an undergraduate, I had no idea what I was going to do with a degree in history, because I thought I wanted to be a history teacher at like high school, and my senior year of college realized that I absolutely did not want to be a high school history teacher. And so I was like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? So now I have BA, MA, PhD in history. Um, Went to grad school only because I was avoiding the real world because I didn't want to have to figure out what to do. And I was looking around at things that had to do with history that were not teaching and came across a program at UCR at the time that was in what they called program historic resources management. They don't call it that anymore, but and so that was my way of avoiding going into the world of reality and ended up being a career path. But it opened my eyes to all kinds of opportunities for historians that I didn't know existed, at least in terms of what undergraduates were being taught at my school in the 1990s. Um, so now that the field has really broadened more about public history as a larger concept, including archives and museum work and historic preservation and site interpretation and all those kinds of things, it's really exciting. And so it's great to be able to share that there's more than just being a teacher for historians.
Thank you, Nathan. Eric, can you jump in as well, please?
Sure. Yeah. My pathway into archives is a little bit different than Nathan's. So when I was an undergrad, I was actually deciding between becoming a history major and a psychology major over at UC Riverside. I wound up choosing the psychology route, thinking I was going to go on to become a clinical psychologist. I did research as an undergrad, but I also worked in the library there as an undergrad. And when I graduated, I decided to take like a gap year. And in that gap year, I got hired on at UC Riverside in their special collections and archives division. And I just really enjoyed working with the materials, with the history. It kind of connected back to this history thing that I always liked. So I decided to actually scrap becoming a psychologist and then went back to get my master's in library and information science and just pursue archives from there. So the cool thing about archives is, yeah, like people come from all different disciplines. I mean, a majority do come from like a public history background, but you have people in the field that have, a lot of other different bachelor's degrees and somehow kind of just fell into the field and enjoyed it.
That's a great start, and I'm interested because I've been in archives in a few different settings for my research as a historian, and it's been universally a really wonderful experience to me, even in settings where some of the materials are classified or it's difficult to access some of the materials. Can you each talk a little bit about a day in the life of an archivist, the kind of activities that you're engaged with on a daily basis in the field of archival work?
Eric, you want to go first this time?
Sure, yeah, I can go. So I think it really varies what an archivist does, and it also really depends on the type of organization you work for. So if you're in a larger organization, you can really like specialize. Like you could be the one that deals with processing collections, you could be the one that deals with outreach or digitization. I think for most of us, we're even in academic universities or public libraries, there tends to be few archivists there. So a lot of us get stuck doing kind of a little bit of everything. So it could be everything from, acquiring collections, working with donors, processing these collections, rehousing them for preservation needs, writing grants. What else do we do? Digitize materials. We promote our collections. We work with researchers. So a lot of times researchers will reach out to us with a specific need, and then we see if our collections match, and then we help them gain access to those materials. We supervise. So a lot of us supervise staff. So we supervise, like archives or library specialists, student interns, things along those lines, who all help us in our work. So I think, on a week to week, month to month basis, it really can vary a lot on what archivists do.
Yeah, it's absolutely similar for us in a public library setting. Although we're a bit of an unusual public library setting in that we can't specifically be only in archives or only some other aspect. We operate one museum and have a second museum that'll be open later this year, in addition to our archival and research program. So we only have three professional staff who are full-time and two admins and four museum attendants, and that is the extent of our staff to operate three different sites 7 days a week. So it's and we do a little bit of everything. So just like Eric was talking about, I might be cataloging material. I'm procuring it either by, so we have a small acquisitions budget or working with donors directly. A lot of outreach work we have to do. We have to develop exhibition programs, or if we have a construction project, figure out how that's going to work. I have to manage the budget that goes along with all of these things. And especially the last couple of years has been particularly interesting with trying to build a new museum. And then manage all the volunteers that help us stay open, because with as few employees as we have to absolutely rely on our volunteers to make this happen. So all of that is a lot in a 40 to 55 hour week, depending on my week. But it's different every day, and that's why it's fun.
It does sound fun. It does sound like exciting, lively work with so many different facets to it. You mentioned just now volunteers, and I know that in some of the previous events in this series, Careers for History Majors, we talked about volunteering and intern work and that kind of thing. And that got me thinking about students, what you might say to students like the ones who are attending today or watching this later, um, in terms of best preparing for success in the field of archives and the related fields that we've been discussing. Um, are there a few steps that they can take? The one that jumps to mind is volunteering, getting into the archives, offering to volunteer and finding internships and that kind of thing. Do you have any details about that, and also some other suggestions maybe for if our students are wondering what they can do to best prepare themselves for success in this field?
Go ahead, Nathan.
I was gonna say it helps, I think, if there's an opportunity to sort of take the field for a test drive before going into a graduate program. Just because um, it can be sort of specialized in how you approach stuff. I think having a history background is super helpful in understanding context when you're organizing collections. But that's not the only way to access that as a field. There are a lot of newer programs through library science that offer coursework leading into archives work in addition to traditional librarianship. So being able to sort of see if it's something worth going into graduate school for, if that opportunity comes up, whether it's volunteering at the university archives or something like that, or we offer volunteer opportunities, or we have a summer internship program for undergraduates. We just finished our interviews for that last weekend, but we've had several students from Cal State actually over the years, including Matt Patino, who was one of your recent graduate student alums, who have worked and sort of taken the field for a test drive.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think volunteering, doing some internships is super helpful. Because we've had, public history students that have rolled through the internship program here at CSUSB, and most of them have loved it, and they said, yes, this is definitely what I want to do. But there's been a few that, when they've gone through processing collections, they realized that's not the type of work they want to do. So I think it's really helpful to kind of see what the work is on a day-to-day basis, see if you like it. The one thing I would suggest too is possibly, even if you have time, is interning at different types of repositories. So what you're going to see in like an academic archives compared to what you'll see in a community archives to what you'll see in like a public library, local history room can be a lot different. So, I mean, the work is similar, but it's also different, right? So I think if you try one and maybe you kind of like it, maybe you try a different one. Or if you didn't like one, then try it somewhere else, because there could be the right fit still there for you if you have some varied experience. So that would be, I think, one of mine. I mean, just getting involved, doing a poster presentation, doing some research in the archives, anything that can set you apart from other candidates when you're an undergrad going to apply for jobs after, I think is super helpful. A lot of people come with no experience. So if you've got some experience, you're going to have that leg up on some of the other candidates without it.
Yep, for sure.
So I like that. I always like that idea of encouraging students to show their face, to show up, to get to go to the venue itself, resume in hand, and inquire, to send cold emails and that kind of thing, to make your needs known and your interests known in terms of a place that you might be interested in working as a volunteer and sort of taking for a test drive, as Nathan said. I'm interested also in next steps in terms of graduate school. We're lucky that we have two different experiences and different academic paths here today. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about those different paths for the archives, one of which is an academic, a PhD route, and then one is the academic master's in library sciences, I think. So I was wondering if we could hear a little bit of a sort of compare and contrast of those paths, those educational paths within the field of the archives.
Yeah, so I can take the master's in library and information science side, since that's kind of my experience. So I definitely took the library side. I went to San Jose State, received my master's. So for archival work and not teaching in like a library program, the master's is the terminal degree. So it's what's accepted for archivist positions. I've specialized while I was in library school, so I was on the archives track. So after my initial general classes, all of my classes were archive centric. So that's definitely one path into getting into archives. I will say it's a little more challenging these days going through a master's in library and information science program, because the vast majority are completely online, and some of the archives classes haven't quite figured out how to translate that completely into an online environment, specifically with some of the processing classes and whatnot. So that is something to keep in mind. There definitely are some in-person library programs still around. In California, there's two Masters of Library and Information Science. One is San Jose State, completely online. The other one is UCLA, which is in person. So if you want that in-person experience for archives, UCLA might be the one to kind of focus in on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the program, and I'm not sure exactly because it's been a while since I was over at UCR to know how the graduate program is working in the history department for public history. They sort of rebranded it 20 years ago now under just a larger public history umbrella, which included some coursework options in archives work, but it was still a master's degree in history, just with public history as like the name of the field, the major field. But that program was not, at least at that time, like a really in-depth how to be an archivist. It more introduced a lot of concepts to be then applied to the historical context stuff. And so most of the kind of real processing training that I got was actually then on the job instead of through direct coursework. I can't speak for any other program. That's the only one I've experienced.
Yeah, and I will note too that, I mean, one option as well is, with an undergraduate degree, you can get a job in archives. You'll most likely be like an archives or museum technician or specialist, so assisting archivists and curators with their work. But that also might be a good time to learn, kind of what the job is, what it looks like if you like it, kind of more in depth than an internship would be. I mean, so that's always an option too. There's definitely these paraprofessional jobs available to undergraduates.
Yeah.
That's great, and that's great advice and in line with what we've been hearing in some other fields, in terms of getting into the workplace, doing that volunteer work, doing that internship uh, work, and getting familiar with the setting. In terms of some of your colleagues or counterparts in the field, do you find that this is a field that requires um, a lot of movement? Is there a possibility that you're going to have to move for work, or are you finding that there are a lot of options in the area? I think that's something that a lot of our students often ask about, whether it's because they already have a family, or they're already rooted to the region or something like that. Is archival work something where you need to be ready to travel, in your experience?
Um, I think Nathan and I might be an anomaly here, both of
Yeah.
us, because we've both been in the Inland Empire for quite a while. And that is kind of unique to archives. I know a lot of archivists who, can be in the field for 10, 15 years working off of temporary term positions that are
Mm.
usually grant funded. And they kind of just jump from job to job to job. Sometimes it's within the same area. Sometimes they have to move outside of the area. I will say that for the Inland Empire, I mean, there's not a lot of archivists out here. So if, some of us have gotten these jobs and kind of held on to them because we've raised our families in this area, we're just rooted to the area. But a lot of people that I have worked with, I know have had to go out of state for the first job, bounced around a little bit, eventually made it back to California. Some decided to not come back. But I think you do have to be flexible in the field, at least initially, when you're trying to get your foot in the door and get that experience. Later in your career, you might have more options, but definitely it can vary. I mean, sometimes you can fall into a great position and it can last, permanent position for 20 years, but other times maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm in my 26th year, and I was still finishing my MA when I started with a part-time job, as an archives assistant at Smiley Library, and that then I finished the first degree, and then got hired on full time, and so here I am 27 years later. It's a long time. And my intent is to retire from here. So, but that is really unusual
Mm.
anymore. I know that's unusual across the workforce, not just in history and library related fields, but across the workforce. People don't tend, I guess, to find a place and then stay.
Hmm. I, that also sort of resonates with some of the other positions that we've been talking about. That flexibility at the early stage of your career, I think, is something that our students may need to hear and be aware of,
Mm.
the importance of that kind of flexible approach to the job market, especially in the early years. We talked with some folks from state parks and national parks as well, and I was wondering if you see some areas of overlap there, whether it's in something like a historic house setting, or a historic site, or a state park, or a national park, or that kind of thing. Does are there similar aspects to the kind of career preparation, or is there the possibility of lateral movement in the world of archives to the world of something like historic houses, or state or national parks?
Certainly, I don't know how it would be for the library science track. Certainly, those who come in from a history perspective have probably a better chance of lateral movement into other segments of history like work, just because the interpretation part which is what a lot of that is key to being a historian. And so whether it's working at a historic site where something has to be interpreted, or a battlefield or something like that, and there's those types of things are in every state across the country. Um, Definitely some of the broader understanding and education is, I think, useful. That's not to say that there aren't specific, house museums have their own archival collections. a lot. I can think of Kimberly Crest, which is here in Redlands, has a significant um, archival collection. They don't have enough of a budget to hire a full-time archivist to do it, though, so the staff that is there has to have some familiarity with archives in order to work with that material effectively.
Yeah, and I think so like most governmental entities, so like, the state parks, the national parks, National Archives, Records Administration, in most cases, I think they still do preference the history degree over the library science degree. So the library science degree, I think really kind of keeps you on the kind of library, museum, academic archive track. It doesn't always expand into some of those other like historical houses and some of the state park things. I will also say that typically with the MLIS, you almost get stuck on one side of the fence. So if your first job is kind of in the public sector, like local history room at a public library, you pretty much kind of stay in that track. If you get kind of
Mhm.
your first job in the academic library, you kind of stay in that track. I mean, there's definitely an opportunity to overlap, but it doesn't happen as frequently as you would think, because academic and public libraries do function very differently. So when you get experience in one, while it does translate to the other, people kind of tend to stay on one side or the other. So in that sense, it can be a little restrictive with the library degree. I think the history would have you have a lot more opportunity to kind of move back and forth between different things.
Thanks both. This is giving us a really good, I think, a lay of the land. You'd mentioned part-time work. We talked about volunteer and internship and that kind of thing. Is there an aspect of archival work that may be part-time in terms of hiring folks for an intense uh, period of the year, or an intense period in the cycle of the institutions where you're working, where you might hire people part time in that type of work, say in the summer, or another any busy season or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a busy season per se. I know a lot of like the paid internships for students typically happen around this time of year over the summer. So you'll see a lot of them start to pop up in April, May, running through the summer months. Here, unfortunately, we don't have paid internships. It's usually for course credit. Um, so yeah, I think this is the type of year you'll see the internships. The other, like as far as like part-time work, like I think that definitely happens. Usually it's related to grants. So
Yep.
an institution will get a grant for a specific project for a specific amount of time. So it could be like, part-time for a year or full-time for 6 months. You do see those come up, but it really is it's kind of like a one-off type thing. It just depends on what the project is, who got the funding, and then how long their project is. But those definitely exist out there pretty frequently.
Yeah, it's kind of like working as an adjunct at a college or something where you may only have one class, or you might this semester have two classes to teach, but it's not enough for a full-time job. And next semester you may be at a completely different institution, wherever adjuncts are needed. So I mean, on the grant thing, it's sort of like that. You just have to keep an eye out for them.
And what are some places where interested students might go in terms of regional, state, or national institutions or organizations, in terms of learning more about the field, maybe in reading some publications about the state of the field, and also looking for opportunities for internships and fellowships and grants, and of course employment in the field of archives. Are there some national organizations, regional, state organizations
Mhm.
that they can look at and learn more about there? And I can hunt down the websites if you call them out.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find the right
Well, the
ones.
Society of American Archivists is the national organization, and they have a huge number of publications. I use excerpts from a lot of those publications when I'm teaching my public history class at U of R. And there's also many states also have them. So the Society of California Archivists has been around since the mid 1970s, and they have annual meetings. And I'm sure that there's like an employment board on their website as well. Those are two places that I would go if I was looking to learn more.
Yeah, so I think Society of American Archivists, in California, we've got the Society of California Archivists, but there's a ton of other regionals. There's like Northwest Archivists, there's ones from the from back east. So I think looking at those regional websites, a lot of them have like job or internship boards where you can find things. I also posted a link to what it's a site called Archives Gig, and they link out to a lot of the job opportunities in kind of the library archives museum field, as well as internships for students. So that's also a good place to start if you're looking to get your foot in the door.
That's great. And I just tracked down the first one of those, and I'll track down the California one as well. Um, I want to remind Ava, Samuel Madison, and anybody else who has any questions live to please jump in or throw your questions into the chat. Um, then I want to ask Eric and Nathan something that I always ask, especially if you're anywhere in the hiring process or in the process of selecting interns, volunteers, part-time workers, full-time workers. If you're involved in that hiring process, um, are there some things that our students can know or should know, or maybe what you wish you'd known when you were an undergraduate student, to best prepare you for the field? If there are things, if there are some hallmarks of a really terrific cover letter or a really great CV or resume, or something that you might see and say, that's a great sign that the student flags this or shows an awareness of this or has this experience or something along those lines. And then conversely, if you want to note if there's anything that you see it and you say, this is going to be a problem or something to avoid.
Do you want to go, Nathan, or me?
Oh, I don't know if we were waiting for any student potential questions or if you wanted to go ahead.
Um, yeah, I can take that real quick. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I've been on a lot of like search committees over the years for all sorts of different library and archives positions. And I think, in the application process, one of the main things I'm looking for is some relevant experience. For these entry level jobs, it's not a lot, but just something. If it's an internship, if they volunteered, if they, worked as a student in an archive, anything that they can point to that shows, a commitment and an interest in the field, I think is super helpful. Once it gets to the interview stage, I think it's all about like engagement, like how engaged they are with the type of work and the enthusiasm that they show. I think that goes a long way in interviews of, picking people who have some experience, but who are also really excited and interested to enter the field. And those candidates always seem to kind of rise above for me. So I think those would be kind of the things to, get some experience and then, show your enthusiasm for the field.
One tip for an interview situation that I would give, having also interviewed a number of people now over the years, is I'm amazed at the number of candidates who have done zero research about the institution where they're applying. And like these jobs are not that easy to come by, at least in the Inland Empire. And you would think we've got a pretty full website. You could learn all about special collections at Smiley Library and be able to demonstrate that you have some familiarity going in. And so people are like, oh yeah, yeah, it looks like a pretty library. Like, okay, well, let me, I guess, tell you what we do, and then even though it's all there, so if the candidates that tend to impress me the most are the ones who've clearly done their research about the institution and about maybe what they think the job might entail before they get to the interview page, and then often we ask at the end of an interview if they have any questions that they want to ask about us, and if there are questions that are kind of specific to the institution that show some familiarity, that's always a step above under the, no, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Nathan. Like doing your homework,
Yeah.
in your cover letter, right? So that you're making sure your cover letter matches what that job is looking for. And then if you get to the interview process, really reading up on the institution and understanding it a bit, because then you'll be able to relate kind of your thoughts on their institution. You'll have better questions about like what their collections may be. And I
Mhm.
also say and this is pretty basic, but for the resume phase, just make sure your resume is well organized and that you're not having spelling errors, because archivists are very organized. Like that's what we do. So those things will definitely jump out if someone's coming through with a resume that just has a lot of errors in it.
Hmm.
That's great advice. And we've talked often, I think in every event in this series, we talk about this dynamic of fit, of being a good fit for the institution and being able to demonstrate that actively. Um, and certainly both of those points are I think, crucial to an applicant demonstrating that not just sort of freestanding excellence, but also, preparedness for that particular position and awareness. And that is a good sort of interview technique that I think all applicants should bear in mind. Be prepared for that open question at the end. Do you have any questions for us? And yeah, that's a good time to ask some really well informed and insightful questions that might get you some good additional information. Um,
Hmm.
and Ava noted, I just missed applying for the internships at Smiley. Is there anything else? Are there other opportunities? Interested in the historic home showcases in Redlands also? Are there volunteer opportunities in this? And that's from Ava. Um, any insights on that, Nathan?
We certainly always are happy to consider volunteer opportunities year round. We are happy to partner with a college or university to see if there's a way to do that for credit. Um, we just do the once a year thing for the paid internships. But if there's a way to partner with either Cal State or we do this with U of R to get some kind of credit for time where we can set up a specific number of hours, something like that, and some goals for whatever that volunteer experience is.
Thanks, Nathan, and thanks for the question, Ava. And I just that link is there also for Smiley, so definitely do think about um, those other uh, volunteer opportunities. And Eric, I know there's an internship opportunity with the library that you had mentioned to us. So if you have that link and want to share it out, or I can hunt it down, if you call out the name of it, I'll be able to find it.
Yeah, I can find that and drop it in. So yeah, so right now we our internship application is open until June 30th for fall 2026. So we host two internships in special collections, one in the fall semester, one in the spring semester. The fall semester one is open right now. Unfortunately, they're not paid internships, but we can definitely work on them for course credit. Most of the students that have come through have done it for course credit. We've had one that hasn't. But yeah, that's open right now, and I'll drop the link in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Um, Madison, did you want to ask a question? You can go ahead and unmute if you'd like.
Yes, hi. I had a couple questions that I wrote down. This one I think goes to any, but is there like a specific difference between archivist and curator?
Thanks, Madison.
I think part of that is setting. So in a museum, the professional staff tend to be curatorial type staff. An archivist is specific to an archive setting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, you don't really find curators in libraries. Curators are in museums, and archivists would be in libraries. Museums do have archivists working with collections, but I think the curators, they're not necessarily the ones, I guess, processing through materials and managing
Mhm.
them. They're more like contextualizing some of the
Mhm.
materials in the museum. They work a lot with exhibits, things like that, which archivists also do on the archives and library side. But yeah, I think Nathan's point to where like curators are museums, archivists are and archives are libraries.
There's a kind of rectangle square there a little bit because I remember, I think from in previous years, um, noting how many material objects come through the archives, and we often have, or some might have a hasty understanding of archives as being all documents and only documents, but there is also a fair amount of handling of material culture objects coming through.
Mhm.
Um, so I wonder if Madison is also interested or asking about that. On the one hand, sort of in archives having material culture, and then also in museums having archivists handling documents and other materials. So is there some overlap in terms of in terms of training and preparation and experiences there?
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
would
think
say
there's definitely
absolutely.
overlap for sure. So I know, when I worked at UCR and then here, we definitely have museum type objects in our collections, and we don't have curators. This is me and the archive staff that deal with them. I think a lot of the training on that is like an on the job type thing. Over the years, we kind of learn how to deal with these things, but there's definitely, yeah, museum type artifacts that you'll find in archives that archivists have to deal with.
Hmm. And it also just occurred to me, I'm pretty sure that at the Huntington, there's a curator of manuscripts. And I would think in a lot of places when we think about manuscript collections, we think that's archives. But that position there, and I don't know exactly what that job title entails in terms of its work, but there certainly is a curator that's working with archival materials.
And I'm going to confuse this even more. When I was working at UCR, I started as the assistant archivist, and at one point they had changed my title to manuscripts curator, doing the same job.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think they can be used interchangeably. I don't think that's how it was meant to be, but I think depending on where you work, it can definitely get a little sloppy.
I think I like the overlap and the sort of the way in which these ideas swim together, and it's a great question, Madison. I also like the opportunity, and we historians are here in the social and behavioral sciences at Cal State, which is a little bit unusual. Normally, history would be in the humanities or in the arts and letters. Um, but it's always a great opportunity to think about, the sort of one of these things is not like the other kind of exercise where you think, okay, there may indeed be in practice a lot of overlap between the work of an archivist, the work of a librarian, the work of a curator, um, and or historic house docent, or all these different tasks, and it's kind of an exciting exercise to say, okay, how is this different? Sort of think about how the different work that a historian and a sociologist does. It's always a fun exercise to think about how you sort of hash that out and where they may overlap. So it's a great question, Madison, and definitely our guests had have a lot to say on the matter, especially from their own experience. Um, and then Sam asks, what does processing materials in the archive entail? Okay, so a day in the life. How would someone go about accessing these archived materials for CSUSB? So start with Eric, I think.
Yeah, that's a big question. So yeah, I mean, I'll try to make it real basic. So essentially, in archives, you'll find boxes of materials on a certain topic, right? So for example, let's say here at CSUSB, we have a bunch of, materials related to the athletics department. So what you would do is that a lot of times it comes in, it's not in any kind of order. So you've got to go through and you need to arrange it into like, basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, whatnot. So you start to have these like series of arrangements. And then once you have those, then you start to describe the different materials. So are they photographs of, baseball? Are they, programs from the sporting events? And you start to kind of arrange and describe these materials into what we call a finding aid. And then this finding aid kind of lists out all the materials that you went through in these boxes. And that's put online so that researchers can, do a Google search and be like, oh, cool, CSUSB has, men's baseball photographs from the 1970s. Let me request that and use it, whether it be in-house here in special collections in the library, or whether we scan a version of it and send it to them through email. So in a very basic sense, that's kind of processing from, things that aren't described or arranged to get them into a format where people can view these inventories online. And I don't know, Nathan, you may have something to add to that.
Well, when you get into public land, it can be even messier than that because you might have someone's lifetime of paper stuff, and then you have to figure out from within that, you know, what's worth keeping even. Do we need every gas company bill and receipt? Or is there something that can be learned from that? Or, what are the things that are important? And then figuring out how to organize from there. And a lot of times it'll be, oh, and there's a bunch of brochures from a cruise that they went on, or maybe something when they went to Mentone and there was a demonstration, or just a whole disparate series of things, and then figuring all of that out. So if we like the collections that come in if it's only from one department.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, sometimes, when you're working with like a university archive, these are like university records a lot of times. There's things that have been kept in file cabinets that get transferred to the archives. It makes it a lot easier than if you get someone's personal papers collection, which, as Nathan described, can have just about anything in it. And then as the archivist is literally sifting through, deciding what this story is that needs to be told, and kind of focusing in on that scope, and some of this other stuff saying, okay, that really isn't, where's the research, where's the value in some of this other things. And sometimes those are, the accession from the collection, and it's really focused in on a certain topic or certain part of that individual's life.
We got a collection in 20 years ago now that even had some X-rays in it from a particular medical diagnosis for the person whose stuff it was, and figuring out how to deal with things like that, which we have not made public, by the way.
That sounds like it cuts right to the training, to the specific training. Um, I did want to ask because I seem to remember from previous discussions, um, taxidermy animals making their way into the archives, all kinds of wild adventures. But Madison, before we get into wild adventures in archives as a final concluding thought, Madison had another question. Madison, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. You should be able to unmute.
Uh, I just have two more questions left. One of them, so I did apply for the internship at the CSUSB library special collections, and then this would also apply with volunteer work. I have also applied to the San Bernardino County Museum as well. But within like the hiring process, do you still hire even if someone doesn't have experience, but they're applying to like gain experience?
Oh yeah. So for the internships here at CSUSB, there's no experience required. Like, we're expecting you all not to have experience. So we provide full training in how to process through a collection. So yeah, so experience isn't necessary here for our internship program. It's really to support the students and help them gain experience doing this type of work. I'm not too sure about the county museum. I would imagine it's very similar to that, but they may have some additional requirements of experience that we don't.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is um I'm trying to gain my or finish up. I got like roughly a year left to get my public history degree. Would that also like be accepted to be an archivist as well?
It would for us.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. I mean, most archivists have graduate degrees, right? In something, in public history, library and information science. But there are also people who have the title archivists who just have undergraduate degrees in, let's say, public history or history. You typically find those at, some of this like local historical societies, community archives. Once you start to get into like kind of the public library setting or the academic setting, those position titles are usually reserved for people with advanced degrees. But again, I mean, it kind of varies, honestly, in the field. I mean, there's definitely archivists working with just undergraduate public history degrees for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
These are great questions, and I want to start moving toward wrapping up at about the 15-minute mark or so. Um, but I also want to invite our guests if they have any concluding thoughts, anything that jumped to mind as we were talking in terms of helping students think about the field and preparing for the field, and things they can do. We've covered, I think, a lot of ground in terms of things they can do to best position themselves for success in the field. But I just want to open the floor to you both for any other notes or any other thoughts about what might make them even better prepared for embarking on this field.
We're always willing to meet with students who are interested in learning more and share our experiences and share our volunteer opportunities, um, give some exposure to what the field is. Because usually if people are interested enough to sit through a presentation like we're doing right now, that's pretty serious about looking at this as a potential future. So we're always willing to do that. We kind of see our role in our library at least as also having a teaching component, instead of just a kind of working place component. So my colleague Maria Carrillo and I both teach some and have our terminal degrees in history too. So
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like, I mean, I think all archivists are more than happy to talk to, young students coming up wanting to be archivists or interested in the field. So I would just say never hesitate to reach out to,
yeah,
the archivist on your campus or at your local library, or, even if there's a specific place you want to work, reach out to the archivist there, and just kind of talk with them and get an idea of what their work looks like. I mean, it never hurts to get that introduction, right? To,
yeah.
kind of get yourself seen. And like I said, most archivists are more than happy to talk with you. I think the only other thing I'd point out is, part of the reason why a lot of us, go to college is we want to get a good job. We want to get, of course, we want to love what we do, but we also want to be able to live off what we do. I will say that, financial compensation and pay varies greatly in archives. It depends on the position, it depends on the organization, and it depends on the location. I mean, and it can vary a huge amount. I think education and experience also come into play. So even if you can get a job as an archivist with an undergrad degree, you're probably going to get paid a lot more if you've got that advanced degree and you're pursuing those types of positions. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking for jobs about like it definitely varies more than some other fields do. From like, barely living wage to you're living decent, right? Where none of us are in this for the money. So none of us are going to become rich off it. But you can definitely make a living. It's just you got to kind of look at where those opportunities are and what level of experience and education you need for that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about the informational interview that I noted was a new idea to me. I think just last year I learned about that there was a term for this, that is sort of reaching out to folks who are working gainfully, successfully in the field, and inviting them to lunch or breakfast or a cup of coffee or something like that. Um, and on the careers page for CSUSB History Department, down at the bottom there, I have a couple links to how to go about a relatively formal informational interview, one that's going to maybe put you in good stead with the institution that you're interested in, but also give you lots of really good information about um, the kind of things that we've been discussing here today, but even more detail because it'll be a one-on-one conversation between you and somebody in the field. Um, this has been really terrific, Eric, Nathan. Eric, I think I mispronounced your surname. Can you correct me, please, on that?
Oh yeah, it's Milenkiewicz.
Milenkiewicz. Milenkiewicz. Um, uh, I'm really very, very grateful to you both, and I guess for a fun way to end, uh, crazy adventures in archives. Craziest day on the job. I can't remember if it was a moose or an elk, or it might have been one of your colleagues, somebody else who mentioned having that in the archives. I know I've had some wild days working in the archives up at Hoover, and then in some Chinese archives where there are, I think there was a tobacco pouch somebody said that just had spilled all throughout uh, the the box. But any fun adventures that jump to mind when I ask?
We have the grave marker of an early, well, he was 19th, early 20th century author about California named Joseph Smeaton Chase. And we ended up with it because the cemetery where he was buried had decided to pull out all of the vertical markers and put in flat markers because it was easier to mow. And this guy who collected or was interested in Western Americana ended up with it because of who it was, and he was going to take it home and make it into a coffee table. And it's, I don't know, granite or marble. It's heavy. It's very large. And his wife said, under no circumstances is that coming into the house. And so it ended up in the basement of Smiley Library.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say a weird thing I've had to work with, and then also kind of a unique thing we have here at Cal State. The weird object would be at UCR, there was a book bound in human flesh, which you don't see very often.
Hmm.
And it was from a donor many, many years ago. So that was kind of an interesting thing. I didn't know that they did that back in the day, but there were some cases where they did. And less gruesome here at CSUSB, we actually have a key to the city. So we have a key to San Bernardino. We don't know who it was given to, where it's from. It just kind of landed in the archives here, and it's kind of big. It's maybe like 12, 13 inches, very ornate. So it's kind of a cool thing to show off when people come through.
That's great. And I asked for it, I guess, Eric. Well, that's quite quite an object to have, and Nathan as well. Um, uh, I'm just watching the ghost story, Widow's Bay. It's a very very scary new series. So it gives me chills to hear those stories. Very very cool. Um, I want to thank our students for joining, and especially I want to thank um, uh, our guests, Nathan Gonzalez and Eric Milenkiewicz. It's always a delight to catch up with you. It's really really an honor to be able to share your work in this space and to learn from you both a lot about the field of archives. I hope that our students have learned a lot, and I'll be sharing, when I share this recording out, I'll also share links to their professional pages so that you can find them and learn more about their work. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, Nathan, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jeremy. Good
Thank
luck,
you.
all.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.